Thank you for your interest in the Gay and Lesbian History on Stamps virtual presentation. This quarter's presentation is on U.S. foreign joint issues by Art von Rhein. Art has been collecting stamps since he was about 8 or 9 years old when he received a small hand-me-down album from his older brother who'd lost interest. Instead of using mail order, he bought many of his first stamps at a local office supply store. The owner was a stamp collector who also collected an extensive stock of stamps and philatelic accessories. Art has served in various leadership roles in several philatelic organizations, including the Texas Philatelic Association, which grew from about 350 members to almost 600 while he was serving as president and journal editor in the mid-2010s. In addition to the American Philatelic Society and several other national specialty groups, he currently maintains membership in 2 local stamp clubs. He is webmaster for GLHS and has made significant improvements, including making the site compatible for smartphones and tablets. Although he has numerous specialty collections, he currently focuses on postally used worldwide stamps up to the point where the country started issuing stamps mainly for collectors. Welcome, Art, and thank you for presenting today.
There we go. Okay, I've unmuted myself. So I'd like to thank everyone for bearing with my presentation. This presentation, I originally gave it in 2 parts to a club, and it ran because it would run maybe an hour and a half. So what I'm going to do tonight, the slides are all there, but some of them I'm just going to rush through them. And if you can yell stop if you want to know more about it. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going and skip through ones that are quite similar. There's also a few personalities, LGBT, that have been featured on some of these joint issues. And I'll mention those. Those are more recent vintages because the first issues we're going to start with that are official joint issues is 1959. So let me get started here. So the first question is, what is a joint issue? Well, they used to have a joint issues society, and they came up with an official pronouncement that joint issue can be declared only when 2 or more independent postal administrations, and the word there is independent, sign an agreement to create new postage stamps or items for postal use with a common interest and then issue them within a predefined time frame. You're probably familiar with a number of these, and usually they have a similar design, but that's not always the case. Usually the issue dates are within a few days of each other. Because of time zone differences, there are occasions where they don't occur on the same day, maybe the day before or the day after. If you're a purist, these are the only type issues to collect are these official joint issues. So there is more to it, and there are also accidental joint issues. A twin issue, well, you can see an example there from Mexico where the postal administrations did not agree to issue stamps with similar design or anything, but it happened anyway. Parallel issue is generally not having the same design. Then a concerted issue is, this one is particularly interesting. The breast cancer stamp that's been on sale for years in the US. Slovakia came up with I guess they licensed the design and used it on one of their stamps. And I'm not sure if there's not some more of those out there as well. A borrowed design is where someone likes the design of a stamp issue, and so there's no license involved. Postal Administration just likes it, so they saw someone else issue, so they just steal the design. I don't know of any for involving U.S. Stamps. What's not a joint issue? Colonial, territorial issues, omnibus issues, and associated issues. And you can see there the Europa issues that come out every year. That's an associated issue. That's the most prolific one there is. How are joint issues collected? Well, pretty much any way you want. Single stamp souvenir sheets, booklets, press sheets, etc. Birthday covers. And I prefer the dual canceled birthday covers. Those are ones with a cancel from each postal entity on it that covers both stamps. That's not always possible, but these days, usually you can get them that way. The collection may include more than one of the above. And we'll have examples in this presentation, all of those. So I have a quiz. I like quizzes. So here's a quiz for you. Only one question though. Which two of the following countries has participated in the most official joint issues with the US? I'll let you think for 10 seconds.
Canada.
Does anybody know? Raise your hand. Okay, well, the answer is Canada and Sweden with 6 each. I compiled some statistics on the frequency of joint issues with the US. And there you can see in the 80s to about the year 2000, they were coming out pretty rapidly, and then it declined somewhat in more recent years. There's been none since 2019 involving the US. But if you collect other countries, you'll see there are still a lot of them going on involving Sweden and Spain, or European countries in particular, and Japan. So here's the first one, the 1959 St. Lawrence Seaway issue. And this one was issued on June 26, 1959, because they opened up the St. Lawrence Seaway. This was a big deal in 1959. And as you can see from reading below, Queen Elizabeth II even showed up for this. So this was a major event. It was broadcast on TV, and you could watch the grand opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway live on TV back then in 1959. The only error that occurred in a U.S. foreign joint issue is this one, and it occurred on the Canadian stamp, and it was a first Canadian error like this, and there were about 200 unused inverted stamps that ended up in private hands. And the Canadian Postal Service, once they got wind of this, they started telling all the postmasters to go through their entire stock and pull out sheets that had this inversion on it. So they actually did find some that were not sold to the public, but nonetheless, 200 unused inverted stamps ended up in private hands. And then a bank in Nova Scotia used them on mail, and other people use them on mail. So there are used copies around, several dozen as well. I think those sheets that they pulled from the post offices ended up in the National Postal Museum in Canada. It's defunct now, so I think you may be able to still view the whole entire sheets, but they're going to be in the Canadian Museum of History instead. This is my copy, and unfortunately my scanner's not blew out, and so that's not as good a scan as I would normally have. Here's a issue with a cover with both stamps on it, and at the time, in 1959, they didn't like to put cancels of 2 different countries on the same cover. Now that's the normal thing. So someone figured out a workaround. They did a folded cover, and on one side is a place for the Canadian cancel and the Canadian stamp, and on the other side is the US stamp and the US cancellation. So that's an example of a combination cover with cancellations from both countries on the stamps of both countries. And from now on, we will see most of the covers I show you are combination covers. There's a few that I'm lacking or they don't exist. Here's a souvenir card that was issued. I don't think they issue souvenir cards anymore, but in the 20th century, they were quite common. The next joint issue occurred the next year for Mexico's independence. And this is a combination cover. And the interesting thing about this cover is that at that time, Mexico did not have a first day of issue cancellation. However, there was a stamp club in Mexico that convinced the Mexican postal authorities to go ahead and have a special cancellation for it. And I don't know if there was a bribe involved or not, but it did happen. And the Mexican stamp was issued a day before. So this is actually post-dated cancel for the Mexican. And I don't know how long it took after the issue of to make these up, but they are around like this. And here's a souvenir card again for the same issue. 5 years passes before the next joint issue, and it's for the settlement of Florida, joint issue with Spain, and 400th anniversary. And here's a cover with both stamps on it. So and these are the US and the foreign stamp. Now, there was a problem with this issue in that there was a time difference, and back then, the US, you had to have your request for a stamp first day cancel in the day before the stamp was issued. They didn't have any of this grace period of 30 days, 60 days, in 90 days. So it would be impossible really, unless you had a private jet plane so you could fly from Madrid, Spain to St. Augustine, Florida to get these stamps together, because you could still get the cancellation if you appeared in person. But for mail orders, no. So what this is a combination cover with a fake US cancellation on it. If you collect joint issues and you have a cover like this, it is fake. I do not own this one, but I did at one time, because I was the one that I bought one, and I sent it to the APS to see if it was genuine, because I didn't think that it was possible. Well, the APS came out and said, no, that's a fake cancellation. And as a result, an article appeared in Lynn's Stamp News a couple of weeks later, reporting these fake cancellations. But joint issue collecting was popular at the time. So if you see this, and there's another version where they took the Spanish first day cover and made a fake issue too. So there's a genuine cancellation on the Spanish cover at the upper left, and then a genuine cancellation on the US, but they shouldn't exist together. Again, here's another card, souvenir card that was issued in 1975 for the same issue. Speaking of 1975, we jumped to 1975 for the next joint issue, which involved the Apollo-Soyuz mission. These covers are scarce, and it's about, I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Postal Commemorative Society, but if you are, they're one of those groups that charges a lot of money for first day covers. And this is the only one I know of that's worth anything, because you had to special order it to get a Russian cancel. So that's only nice item you can get from the old Postal Commemorative Society first day covers that abound, or you can buy a huge collection of them for next to nothing on eBay. Back then, the US did not allow living persons on stamps, but the Soviet Union did, and they issued additional stamps. So you can see there's cosmonauts on a Soviet's sheet there for first day issue, and there's some other stamps that the Soviet Union issued besides the ones with the common design. In 1976, the bicentennial celebration was underway for the US, and this resulted in a number of issues. Here's one for the Interphil exhibition. That was a big international exhibition held in Philadelphia, and they had a twin issue. As you can see, the designs are similar. 1977, not a bicentennial one, but nonetheless a peace bridge. And as you can see, they couldn't decide on similar designs, but nonetheless, it is an official joint issue. So the designs do not always have to be identical, but most often are. Here's another non-identical one for Philip Mazzei. I guess I do not know Italian, so maybe I just mispronounced his name. He was a wine merchant and involved in bringing wine culture to the US. For you guys that are alcoholics, you can thank Philip Mazzei for bringing wine to the US. 1981, James Hoban designed the White House. So he was from Ireland, so there's an Ireland stamp and 2 US stamps, because when this stamp came out, there was a rate change pending. So the Postal Service just issued 20-cent and 18-cent stamps. So they would have one valid for whichever rate. So the rate change occurred 18 days after the first day of issue. That's a rather unique circumstance there that happened for a commemorative US issue. There's a number of stamp issues for the establishment of diplomatic relations with the US after we became independent. And here's one with the Netherlands. Here's one with Sweden. As you can see, Sweden issued its stamps in a booklet. And there's a combination first day cover there. And a souvenir card. If I rush through these too fast, let me know. Here's one for the 300th anniversary of German settlement in the US, twin design. And they had a souvenir card for that. And the German Federation of Philatelists had a philately and history souvenir sheet, a series going back then. And number 5 involved this issue. The perforated sheet was not valid for postage, however. St. Lawrence Seaway, it's been 25 years, so another stamp came out for the 25th anniversary. Queen Elizabeth, I don't know if that she showed up for that. Is that her in the picture? I really didn't research that, but as you can see, the color design on the 2 stamps is similar, but otherwise they are dissimilar. Obviously, they did some coordination on the graphic designs of those 2 stamps. And there's a souvenir card with the stamps and the original 1959 issue. John McCormick was a famous Irish tenor during the first half of the 20th century. And so here's another joint issue with Ireland. Ameripex 86 was another big international stamp show, and Sweden also had an international show, Stockholm, 1986. So as you can see, both countries issued a little booklet, and one stamp in each booklet has the same design. The US stamp actually had a first day at State College, Pennsylvania, which used to be the home of the American Philatelic Society. Here's a postcard for first joint issue postcard for Francesco Vigo, who became involved on the American side during the Revolutionary War. Statue of Liberty Centennial was another big event, televised in prime time for the rededication because it was starting to fall apart. I guess we'll have another one of those in 2086 for those of you who are still around for when it's falling apart again. France also issued a postcard, as you can see there. The US didn't do that. They just add the stamps, the same design. And here's a souvenir card for that. Another treaty issue with Morocco. Australia, the bicentennial, the US issued a stamp for the Australia bicentennial. But if you think back, Australia did not do the same in 1976 for us. So we got slighted on that. New Sweden, 350th anniversary. And this is the first 3-nation joint issue involving the US. And that's because Finland used to be part of Sweden. So we had Finnish settlers coming along with the Swedish settlers. So that's how it came to be a 3-way joint issue. And there's all 3 stamps on a combination color. And as you notice here, just note that if you want a postally used, properly used 44-cent US stamp, it's a tremendous rarity because the rate went up to 45 cents 5 days after this US stamp was issued. So if you see the US stamp issued to a foreign destination, it's always going to have some extra postage attached. In 1989, there was a French Revolution issue, and you can see the US stamp kind of mimics the French stamp in the images that appear, but otherwise the design is different. 1990, there was a compact of free association with all those former US trust territories, Micronesia, and Marshall Islands. So the US issued a pair of stamps, then Micronesia and Marshall Islands issued them too. Palau didn't join the pact until 1994. They had a problem agreeing to it, but they finally did. And that resulted in another joint issue. Of course, it doesn't appear on this cover because this is 4 years earlier. We'll see it in a moment. In 1990, the US and Soviet Union issued almost identical blocks of 4 stamps for this Creature of the Seas issue. This is the next to last issue involving what is now Russia. The 700th anniversary of Swiss independence was celebrated in 1991. And again, we have similar designed stamps on this combination cover. 1991, we have William Sarayan, and I don't do Russian, but I hope I did okay with that. And his agreements, his parents were immigrants from Armenia. And at that time, 1991, the Soviet Union was still falling apart. So Armenia was not an independent country yet. So the joint issue was with Russia, USSR. So that's the end of the part 1. I read you part 2. So we'll go on to part 2, which is the rest of the official joint issues. 1992, Columbus issue with Italy, and stamp designs are the same. Then we have the souvenir sheets. This is the most costly joint issue you can get because Italy, Portugal, and Spain issued souvenir sheets, and there were 6 souvenir sheets for each country. So I think it ran about $100 to have them all. And I'm just showing here the high value. There was a Columbian World Expo sponsored by the U.S. Postal Service going at that same time. And there was another joint issue in conjunction with the event besides the one we just looked at. And this involved the Soviet Union again. But it was no longer the Soviet Union, it was Russia because Russia was gone. So this is our first joint issue with Russia in 1992. Again, similar designs. Grace Kelly and was a famous actress. She married Prince Rainier III of Monaco, retired from acting. And I couldn't figure out what the dates. I looked all over the internet to see what's the significance of this date. I couldn't find any significance. She died in 1982, so U.S. stamp couldn't be issued for 10 years back then. Now it doesn't matter. I think you got to wait a year to be dead unless you're the president or something. 1994, we had a wildlife conservation stamp with the People's Republic of China. And whooping cranes are well known in Texas because they winter here down near Padre Island. Here's that Palau issue. It came in 1995. And here's a first day cover for the same. So, and you can see the design is similar to the ones they had for Micronesia and the Marshall Islands. And Palau and Micronesia and Marshall Islands, they were quite popular with collectors for about a year or two. Then when they started issuing 100 issues a year because the philatelic agents had taken over, then people quit collecting them. In 1996, there was an endangered species issue with Mexico. And this is, as you can see, there's 15 stamps on this issue. So it's going to be hard to collect covers with both stamps on them, but somehow that managed to happen, but it's not with the souvenir sheets. I'll show you how that happened. Here's a Mexican issue. It has 24 stamps. And of the species shown, there's only 2 that are the same, the crocodile and the ocelot. So these are actually first day covers, and 15 first day covers, and someone figured out how to kind of make them similar. So I have 15 first day covers for this issue. I guess it would have taken a huge poster to, now I don't know if anybody did that or not, to have both sheets on the same cover. You couldn't call it cover really. In 1996 and 1999, 2001, we had the Hanukkah stamps, and you can see the Israeli stamp was issued in one denomination, but the U.S. kept raising its rates, and they just changed the denominations. So we went from 32 to 33 to 34. And I managed to get all those stamps on. I kept sending the cover back in, 32, so I had 32, so I sent in, well, stuck a 33 stamp on there and got that. Then, oh my God, they have a 34-cent stamp. So I sent that one in, got it canceled too. But it didn't quit there. I had no more room. I guess I could have put it on the back. So you can see a 37-cent stamp appeared also. So they recycled that stamp design 3 times. 1999, we have Irish immigration, and a lot of Irish fled to the U.S. due to the potato famine that they had in Ireland. And here we have another one where rate increases cause more U.S. stamp designs, and this is for Cinco de Mayo, is a festival celebrated on the U.S. stamp, and then it just says Mexican festivals on the Mexican stamp. Of course, Cinco de Mayo is actually more popular in the U.S., and it's the biggest day in the U.S. for beer consumption. That's an important fact to remember in case there's a quiz on that. 2001, we had a Nobel Prize Centennial issue involving Sweden, which is one of the countries we've had 6 issues with. And Sweden had a booklet stamp. The U.S. just had a little stamp. So there's a Swedish booklet and the U.S. single, and then we have a combination cover. Greta Garbo, 2005, stamp issue came out, and this is the first, you probably are aware that Greta Garbo did it both ways. She was bisexual, and just here's a quote she once said: "I could not choose between love for a man or love for a woman. I became a slave to both sexes. I was equally fascinated by both female and male bodies." So Greta Garbo, and here's the combination cover. Here's a stamp issue for children's book illustrations. And I don't know if any of these designers, book writers, there seems to be a lot of children's book writers that are family, but don't think any of these were. I know John would know. If he's listening, he could chime in and say, yeah, there are some, but anyway, those, let's see, I'm looking, let's see. Wait, we do have one. Maurice Sendak, creator of Wild Thing, was mentioned in a September 2008 article in the New York Times, and that and said he was gay and lived with his partner, psychoanalyst Eugene Glenn, for 50 years. So we do have him. And Olivia, right there, is the creation of Ian Falconer, who is openly gay. Here's the cover that features Maisie, the twin design stamp selected by the US for the series. The British selection twin design was the Very Hungry Caterpillar. So those are the two stamps with common designs. In 2006, we had a voyage of Samuel Champlain quadricentennial, 400th anniversary. And these souvenir sheets were issued. And what's unique about them is you can see the US and the Canadian stamps are on each souvenir sheet. And the difference between the two is the Canadian stamp has a barcode on it. That's the one issued by the Canadian Postal Administration. And then the US one does not have a barcode. So here's some covers. And here's some of the souvenir sheets with the joint issue cancellations. These are the US sheets. Edith Piaf is France's best known singer internationally, and Miles Davis made Paris his second home. Both were honored June 12th, 2010 on this joint issue. In 1932, Edith Piaf fell in love with Louis Dupont, first of several romances throughout her life, including one with Marlene Dietrich. In 2015, joint issue with Japan, Gifts of Friendship, and this is all about those cherry trees. If you go to Washington in the spring, you can see them blooming. I've never been there in the spring, but I understand it draws huge crowds. 2015, we had the Bergman birth centennial, and Bergman was honored with a stamp in the Legends of Hollywood series, and Sweden issued one of a coil, and also one of its infamous, very, very expensive, limited issue souvenir sheets, shown at the right. Here's a joint issue cover, dual cancellation. 2017, we have the history of hockey. And if you want to read about hockey, just look at the May issue of the American Philatelist. It has 3 or 4 articles about hockey. And I think our Canadian member, I don't know, when we're done, he can tell us about whether he plays hockey. Maybe we have more than one individual online from Canada. And here's a booklet from Canada Post shown on both sides. And the joint issue cover. 2018, have another joint issue with Israel. It's for Hanukkah. And fortunately, we lucked out this time. They did not recycle the design. So I didn't have that problem. That ends that part. And I thought I'd look at a few accidental joint issues. We mentioned them at the start. That's where there's no official agreement with postal administrations. First one was 1938, and Sweden issued a set of 4 coils, 2 sheetlet stamps, and 2 booklet stamps for the 300th anniversary of the Swedish and Finnish settlement of Wilmington. Obviously, 50 years later, they actually had an official joint issue. And the US followed with a single stamp, which you see on the left, and there's a first day cover of the Swedish stamp on the right. 1960, we had a treaty issue with Japan, and the U.S. stamp appeared the next day after the Japanese. They had a souvenir sheet there. But that wasn't coordinated. More items with the stamps and Japanese souvenir sheet. And they issued later a souvenir card. And in 1976, there was a issue by the France for the bicentennial of the U.S. And then the U.S. got around to it 2 years later. This was once mentioned in the USA Philatelic as an official joint issue, but I don't think the guy that wrote that article back in 1999 knew what he was talking about, and it really wasn't an official joint issue, even though if you read that publication, it says it is. I do not agree. There's a souvenir card. 1977, we had a Charles Lindbergh flight. And I'm going to say right now that these are just a sampling. There's more of them. And just so you won't tell me you missed these accidental issues, yeah, there are more of them out there. Rochambeau, don't speak French, so pardon my pronunciation. And it does have a day difference on the issue, so that would be okay if it was an official. Here's Martin Luther's 500th anniversary. Junipero Serra, you can see a similar design on these. Could have been a joint issue, but it wasn't. And here's a similar design souvenir sheet for the 1989 World Stamp Expo between the Soviet Union and the US. As you can see, the concept is similar. Alaska Golden Anniversary, same highway, 15 days difference in the issue date, I think, isn't it? That May 5th. Yeah. May 15th for the Canadian one. Yep, that would be it. So they're 15 days apart. I'm kind of looking at, I'm not reading what's below, I'm just looking at the cover. So not an official joint issue. Golden Anniversary of the UN, 1995, 50th anniversary. Some stuff came out. And why this is, a lot of nations issued stamps for the 50th anniversary and souvenir sheets and what have you. But San Francisco and New York was where they had ceremonies for that. So not official, but the stamps came out the same day. Frida Kahlo, and this was supposed to be an official joint issue, but guess what? Frida Kahlo was an avowed communist. So of course the conservatives in the U.S. said, "Oh, we don't want, that." So the U.S. Postal Service backed out of the joint issue. They came out on the same day, nonetheless. I don't have a cover for that. I'm sure they exist. If you have one, I want it. But and of course, Frida Kahlo, again, we know about her that she was bisexual and had a number of relationships with people in Hollywood. You can read about that on the website, or John will tell you about it. Another one in 2001 for Enrico Fermi, the architect of the nuclear age. He died in 1954 from cancer, which was probably caused by, they weren't aware back then that radiation wasn't particularly good for you. So he died at an early age. And that's it. I thank you for bearing through this. And I think I managed to do what I did at another club in half the time. So thank you for enduring the presentation.
Thank you very much, Art. That was very interesting.
Do you have any
I was
questions?
I was unaware of the 1959 Seaway error. That was fun.
That's
Do
one
we
of
have,
3 Canadian errors, and it's the only Canadian error I actually own.
no. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have a question, Art. On the 2006 children's book, joint issue with Great Britain, you said there were 2 gay, I guess they would be artists. One was Olivia Stample. Which is the other stamp?
One is Olivia is Eon Falconer, and then Maurice Sindak. He was a creator of the Wild Things stamp.
Okay.
Actually, I have a comment also. That you mentioned sort of unknown accidentals. Well, there was a a Venezuelan stamp that was put out very similar to the US Columbia series, which I managed to once show, and I put them all together. And I had a judge who told me later, he said he looked at that and he didn't remember a 25-cent US Colombian series. And then he looked carefully and it was the Venezuelan 25 centavos. So I don't know if that qualifies, but it's something you might want to look at.
It might be. I have looked at a lot of them because in the late 1930s, a lot of the South American countries issued stamps for the Constitution of the US. And I think maybe a half dozen countries, some of them have 6 or 7 stamps with the flag of the US and the flag of their country on them. And I have them, but I've really never added that to this. If I exhibited this accidental issues, then I'd have to go pick up some of those, plus the Colombian one that you just mentioned that I'm not aware of. So email me that and I will check it out in case I ever get inspired to do an exhibit on that, on just accidental joint issues.
Okay.
I've got a question about the 1989 issue with the USSR for the UPU that had the spacecraft theme. Is the reason that one was an accidental is because they didn't have a joint issue
No.
ceremony? Is that
No,
right?
it's not. The Postal Service actually has a list of official joint issues, and also in the American Philatelist, I have it somewhere, maybe 2 years ago, they published a list of official joint issues, and that one's not on it. And it was neither the Postal Service's official list that they put in the USA Philatelic, nor was it in the article that appeared in the American Philatelist. Now, the gal that wrote the article for the American Philatelist was supposed to do a follow-up on accidental issues, but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know if that's going to appear or not.
Speaking of the American Philatelist, it was either 1 or 2 years ago, they did a issue on space. And there's a great article in there about one of the USPS officials that went over to the Soviet Union to work on the Apollo-Soyuz joint issue and his experiences of being in the Soviet Union for that negotiations. One of the funniest things he mentioned about going over there was whenever they talked privately in their hotel rooms about something, like wanting a certain type of food for breakfast or something like that, it always showed up the next day on the breakfast table or wherever it might have been, because they were being constantly monitored while they were over there. So.
I was in the Soviet Union in it was 1973 for a week and a half, and I should have tried that.
Just speak it out to the
food was
lamp.
not very good.
That's right. He also mentioned in the article that they were very careful about the insignia on the spaceships, and then later on astronaut uniforms and what have you. The American flag or the Soviet flag or whatever had to be just perfect for those stamps, you know.
I missed that article. I don't know why. I would have. What if you could email me and tell me what issue it was in? I don't save them, but they have them online now, so I would like to look it up. And read that
July
article.
2020.
July
There we go.
20, July 2020. Okay.
That was a
Gordon
great
Moore-
issue.
Gordon Morrison was he was the deputy postmaster general, or no, excuse me, he was the director of stamp services at the time. He retired as deputy postmaster general. He just passed away in May. I just wrote a story about him, Barry. That's why I know all of this is at the top of my head.
Great. Well,
Okay.
thank you, Scott. That's a great story.
I will check that out. Thank you.
It's a great story. It's well worth the read. It's an adventure ride for sure.
Well, so we have comments that I want to echo in the comment box. Excellent work, Art. Yes, an interesting presentation. Thanks. I'm impressed that you have a St. Lawrence invert. That was from Derwin and the first from John. So we appreciate your speaking immensely. Are there any other questions regarding his presentation? Well, Art, thank you. Our next presentation will, and our next quarterly Zoom meeting will be December 1st, 2021 on AIDS philately. I hope you can all join us there. We'll also be having a meeting in person at the Great American Stamp Show in August. And we look forward to seeing everybody. I'm going to stop recording and we can all stay and socialize. Thank you for attending.